Hello, and welcome to English in Fluency. My name is Alex, and I'm so glad you've decided to join me today. Have you ever been in a conversation where you felt something incredibly strong, a deep emotion, or a complex idea, but when you tried to put it into words, you just couldn't? You searched for the right vocabulary, the perfect sentence, but it felt like trying to catch smoke with your hands. The words that came out sounded flat, or simple, or just not quite right. They didn't capture the true depth of what you were feeling or thinking inside. It's a frustrating experience, one that many English learners face as they move into more advanced B2 level conversations. We learn how to describe the world around us, what we see, what we hear, what we touch. We can talk about our daily routines, our jobs, our hobbies. But what about the things we can't see? What about concepts like freedom, happiness, success, or courage? These are the ideas that give our conversations meaning and connection. They are the heart of what makes us human. Today, we are going on a journey together, a journey to learn how to talk about these abstract ideas naturally, fluently, and with confidence. This isn't about memorizing complicated vocabulary. It's about learning a new way to think and a new way to use the English you already know to express the rich, complex world that exists inside your mind. We're going to unlock the tools that native speakers use intuitively to paint pictures with their words, so you can share your unique perspective with the world. So, find a comfortable spot, take a deep breath, and let's begin this exciting adventure together. The very first and perhaps most powerful tool we need to master is the art of comparison. Specifically, we're going to explore metaphors and similes. Now, don't let those grammar class terms intimidate you. They are simply ways of explaining one thing by comparing it to something else, something more concrete and familiar. A simile uses the words like or as to make the comparison. For instance, instead of just saying, "I was very scared," you could say, "My heart was beating like a drum." Can you feel the difference? Very scared is a label. Beating like a drum is an experience. It creates a sound, a rhythm, a physical sensation in the listener's mind. You've taken an abstract feeling, fear, and connected it to a concrete object, a drum. That connection is the magic bridge that allows your listener to truly understand your experience. Let's think about another feeling. Sadness. You could say, "She was sad." It's correct, but it's not very powerful. What if you said, "Her sadness was like a heavy, wet blanket"? Instantly, we understand more. We can imagine the feeling of weight, of being cold, of being unable to move freely. The blanket isn't real, but the feeling it represents is. Let's practice this for a moment. Think about the feeling of joy. Pure, simple joy. How could you describe it using a simile? Take a moment. Maybe you thought of something like, "Joy feels like sunshine on my face after a long winter." Or perhaps, "His laughter was like music." Both of these take the abstract feeling of joy and give it a sensory detail. The warmth of the sun, the sound of music, making it so much more real and relatable. Metaphors are the close cousin of similes. They do the same job of comparison, but they do it more directly, without using like or as. A metaphor declares that one thing is another thing. It's a bolder, more powerful statement. For example, if you're having a very difficult day, you might say, "Today was a battlefield." You're not saying it was like a battlefield, you're saying it was won. This metaphor instantly communicates struggle, conflict, and the need for strength and strategy. Your listener understands that you weren't just busy, you were fighting through your day. Let's consider the abstract idea of time. How do we talk about it? We often use metaphors. We say, time is money, which means it's a valuable resource that can be spent, saved, or wasted. This metaphor changes how we view our day. We think about our minutes and hours as if they were coins in our pocket. Or think about the phrase, "He has a broken heart." We all understand that his heart is not physically broken into pieces. It's a metaphor for immense emotional pain and sadness. The image of something precious and vital being shattered is so powerful that it perfectly communicates a feeling that is otherwise very difficult to describe. Let's try to create a metaphor together. Think about the abstract concept of an idea. A new idea. How could we describe it? You could say, an idea is a tiny seed. This is a beautiful metaphor. Why? Because a seed is something small and seemingly insignificant at first. But if you give it attention, if you water it with thought and give it the sunlight of encouragement, it can grow into something large and strong, like a tree. This metaphor tells a whole story about the nature of ideas. Now you try. Think about the concept of fear. Don't use like or as. What is fear? Pause for a moment and think. You might have come with something like, fear is a prison. This is a fantastic metaphor. It conveys the feeling of being trapped, of having no freedom, of being held back from where you want to go. Or maybe, fear is a shadow, something that follows you, that is always there, but has no real substance of its own. Using these simple comparisons, these similes and metaphors, is the first major step to sounding more natural and fluent when discussing abstract topics. It's about moving from simply labeling a feeling to describing the experience of that feeling. The next essential tool, which builds upon the idea of comparison, is the analogy. An analogy is like a metaphor that has been expanded. It's a more detailed and logical comparison where you explain a complex or abstract idea by relating it to a simpler, more familiar one. It's a way of saying, to understand this difficult thing, let's first think about this easy thing that works in a similar way. This is an incredible technique for explaining your thought process or a complicated concept to someone else, ensuring they can follow your logic. For example, imagine you are trying to explain the abstract concept of building a successful career. This is a huge, complicated idea with many different parts. You could use an analogy. You might say, building a successful career is a lot like building a house. Now, you don't just stop there. You expand the analogy. You explain the different parts. You could say, first, you need a strong foundation. In a career, that foundation is your education and your core skills. Without that, everything else you build on top will be unstable. Then, you have the walls and the frame of the house. These are your work experiences, the jobs you take, and the projects you complete. They give your career its structure and shape. The roof, which protects the house, could be your network. The professional connections you make that protect you during difficult times and offer you new opportunities. And finally, the interior decoration. The paint, the furniture, that's your personal brand, your reputation, your unique personality. It's what makes your career truly yours and a place where you feel comfortable. Do you see how that works? We took the huge, abstract idea of career success and made it concrete and understandable by comparing it to the process of building a house. each part of the analogy helps to explain a different aspect of the abstract concept. It provides a mental map for your listener to follow. This is incredibly useful, not just in personal conversations, but also in professional settings, like presentations or meetings. Let's try to think through another one. How could we explain the abstract idea of the human mind? It's something we can't see or touch, but it's incredibly complex. We could use an analogy. Let's compare the mind to a city. How could we develop this? Well, the buildings in the city could represent our memories and knowledge. Some are tall skyscrapers. Those are our most important core memories. Others are small houses, representing everyday facts and experiences. The roads and highways connecting everything are our thought processes, the neural pathways that let us move from one idea to another. The traffic on those roads could be our active thoughts, the things we are focusing on at any given moment. Sometimes the traffic is smooth and fast, and sometimes there are traffic jams when we feel confused or overwhelmed. The power grid that supplies electricity to the whole city could be our emotions, which fuel our thoughts and actions. And maybe the city library is our long-term memory, a place where we store vast amounts of information that we can access when we need it. By using this detailed analogy, the abstract and invisible concept of the mind becomes a living, breathing landscape that is much easier to imagine and discuss. Now, let's turn to you. I want you to think about the abstract concept of a good friendship. How could you explain it using an analogy? What familiar process or object could you compare it to? Take a few moments to think. Perhaps you could compare a good friendship to tending a garden. It's not something that just appears perfectly. It requires work. You have to plant the seeds of trust and shared interests. You have to water it regularly with communication and spending time together. You have to pull out the weeds of misunderstanding and conflict before they take over. And if you care for it properly, it grows into something beautiful and nourishing that can last for a lifetime. Using analogies like this shows a deep level of thinking and gives your language incredible richness and clarity. It's a sign that you are not just translating words in your head, but truly thinking and expressing complex ideas in English. The third, and arguably the most human of all these tools, is storytelling, or using personal anecdotes. An anecdote is just a short personal story about a real incident or person. When we are faced with a big abstract question like, "What is courage?" or "What is kindness?" one of the most powerful ways to answer is not with a definition, but with a story. Stories are the language of human connection. They take an abstract virtue or idea and ground it in a real-life experience, making it emotional, memorable, and deeply personal. Imagine someone asks you, "What do you think success is?" You could give a philosophical answer about fulfillment and happiness, or you could tell a story. You could say something like, "You know, for the longest time, I thought success was about having a big title at work and making a lot of money. I worked so hard for that. But let me tell you about my friend, Liam. Liam was a brilliant architect at a top firm. He had the corner office, the fancy car, everything. But he was miserable, working 14-hour days, completely stressed. One day, he just quit. His family thought he was crazy. He took all his savings and opened a tiny little bookstore in his neighborhood. He doesn't make much money now. He drives an old car. But I went to visit him last week. He was sitting in a comfortable chair, sunlight streaming through the window, talking to an elderly customer about her favorite author. And he had this look of pure peace on his face. He told me, "I get to talk about books all day, and I know the names of every dog in this neighborhood." Seeing him like that, so genuinely happy and content, that completely changed my idea of success. For me now, success is that feeling Liam has. It's the peace that comes from building a life that is true to who you are, not what the world expects you to be. Can you feel the power of that? Instead of defining success, the story illustrates it. It gives success a face, a name, and an emotional core. Your listener doesn't just understand your point of view, they feel it. They can picture Liam in his bookstore, they can imagine his sense of peace, and they can connect with your personal journey of discovery. This is far more persuasive and interesting than a simple definition. Let's take another abstract concept: patience. If someone asked you what patience means to you, what story could you tell? Maybe you could talk about a time you taught your grandparent how to use a smartphone. You could describe the frustration of explaining the same thing over and over, the temptation to just do it for them. But then you could describe the moment they finally understood, the look of pride on their face as they made their first video call to a family member. You could conclude by saying, "That's patience to me. It's the quiet understanding that growth takes time, and the reward is in seeing someone else succeed, not in getting things done quickly." Now it's your turn to think. I want you to consider the abstract idea of generosity. Don't think of a definition. Instead, think of a person. Think of a moment. Can you remember a time when someone showed you unexpected generosity? Or a time when you were generous to someone else? Try to form that memory into a short story. What were the circumstances? What did the person do? How did it make you feel? You might have a story about a stranger paying for your coffee when you forgot your wallet, or a neighbor who cooked meals for your family when you were sick. These small, personal stories are the building blocks of meaningful conversation. They reveal your values, your experiences, and your character. When you share a personal anecdote to explain an abstract idea, you are not just practicing your English, you are sharing a piece of yourself, and that is the key to true fluency and connection. So, we have our three powerful tools: metaphors and similes to create vivid images, analogies to build logical explanations, and personal anecdotes to make ideas emotionally resonant. Now, let's put it all together. Let's take some of the most common and important abstract ideas you might encounter in a conversation and practice describing them in a deep and natural way. We'll start with one that everyone on Earth pursues: happiness. If someone in a conversation turned to you and asked, "So, what does happiness mean to you?" It can feel like a test. How do you answer such a big question? Let's use our tools. First, we can start with a metaphor or a simile to capture the feeling. You could say, "For me, happiness isn't one big thing. It's more like a collection of small, warm stones that you gather throughout your day." This is a lovely starting point. It immediately signals that you see happiness not as a huge goal, but as a series of small, precious moments. It's an interesting and unique image. From there, you could expand on this metaphor. You could say, "You know, some days you might only find one or two small stones, like the perfect cup of coffee in the morning, or a song you love coming on the radio." Other days, you might find a big, beautiful one, like getting good news or spending a wonderful evening with friends. The trick is to notice them, to pick them up, and to appreciate them. My pocket might not be full every day, but I always have a few of those warm stones with me. This explanation is poetic, personal, and easy to understand. Then, you could ground this idea in a personal anecdote to make it even more powerful. You could continue, I remember one day I was feeling really down. Everything was going wrong at work. It was raining. I just felt terrible. I was walking home, feeling sorry for myself. And then I saw my neighbor, an elderly man named George, struggling to carry his groceries up the steps. I stopped and helped him. We chatted for just a few minutes. He told me about his granddaughter and showed me a picture. When I left, he just smiled and said, "Thank you. You have a good heart." And in that moment, all my problems seemed to fade away. Helping him, that small act of connection, that was a warm stone. It was a moment of pure, unexpected happiness. So for me, that's what it is. It's not about having a perfect life. It's about finding those small moments of warmth and connection, even on the difficult days. Look at what we've just done. We've taken a huge, abstract question and answered it with nuance, personality, and emotion. We started with a metaphor. Happiness is a collection of warm stones. We explained the metaphor, and we supported it with a specific, personal story. This kind of answer invites further conversation. Your friend could then ask about George, or share their own warm stone moment. You have transformed a potentially awkward question into a point of beautiful human connection. Now, let's try another one together. Let's take the concept of freedom. This is a massive idea with political, personal, and philosophical meanings. If someone asks you, "What does freedom feel like to you?" How would you respond? Let's brainstorm. For a metaphor, you could say, freedom is an open sky. Or for a simile, freedom feels like taking a deep breath after being underwater for too long. That last one is very powerful. It immediately conveys a sense of relief, of necessity, of life itself. Let's build on that simile. You could say, for me, freedom is that feeling of breaking the surface. It's the gasp of fresh air after holding your breath. It implies that maybe you were under pressure or submerged in expectations, either from your family, your job, or even yourself. Freedom is the moment you realize you can finally breathe your own air, live by your own rules. Now, what kind of personal story could support this? You would need to think of a time in your life when you felt constrained or held back, and then experienced a moment of release. Maybe it was leaving a job that made you unhappy. You could tell the story. I worked for years in a corporate job that I thought I was supposed to want. I wore a suit every day, sat in meetings I didn't care about, and I always felt like I was holding my breath, just trying to survive until Friday. The day I handed in my resignation, I walked out of that office building into the afternoon sun. And I remember I just stood on the pavement, and I took the deepest breath of my life. I wasn't a corporate manager anymore. I was just me. I had no idea what I was going to do next, and it was terrifying, but I was breathing my own air. That was freedom. Now, it's your turn to practice this entire sequence. Think about the abstract idea of courage. What is it? Start by finding a metaphor or a simile. What is courage like? What is courage? Perhaps you thought, courage is a small light in a very dark room. Or, courage is like a muscle. It gets stronger the more you use it. Now, choose one and try to explain it a little more. For instance, with the small light metaphor, you could explain that courage isn't the absence of darkness or fear. The darkness is still there. Courage is just the choice to flick on that small light anyway, to take one step forward, even when you can't see the whole path. Finally, think of a personal anecdote. It doesn't have to be a huge, heroic story. It could be about a time you spoke up in a meeting when you were nervous, or stood up for a friend, or tried something new that scared you. Connect that small, real story to your metaphor. Try to say it out loud. This process of combining metaphor, explanation, and story is the key to describing any abstract idea with fluency and confidence. Let's continue to flex this muscle with another fundamental yet incredibly delicate abstract idea. Trust. Trust is the invisible thread that holds all of our relationships together. But because it's invisible, it's notoriously hard to talk about. If someone asks you, "What does trust really mean to you?" Let's build a beautiful and meaningful answer. We can start with a metaphor. Trust is often compared to fragile things. You could say, "For me, trust is like a piece of glass." This is a powerful opening. Why? Because everyone understands the properties of glass. You could elaborate by saying, "It's beautiful and clear when it's intact. It lets the light in and allows you to see things as they really are. But it takes a long time to make, and it can be shattered in a single moment. And even if you try to glue the pieces back together, the cracks will always be there. It will never be as strong or as clear as it was before." This metaphor immediately communicates the value, the fragility, and the near irreversible nature of broken trust. Now, let's evolve this into a more constructive analogy. Instead of just focusing on its fragility, let's think about how trust is built. We could use the analogy of building a bridge. This is a fantastic way to describe the slow, deliberate process of building trust with someone. You could say, "I think building trust with someone is like building a bridge across a wide canyon. When you first meet, you're on opposite sides. The canyon between you is all the unknown, the uncertainty, the potential for misunderstanding. You can't just magically appear on the other side. You have to build a bridge, piece by piece. The first piece might be a small act of kindness, or a promise that is kept. That's like the first rope you throw across. It's not strong, but it's a connection. Then, every time that person shows up for you, every time they are honest, every time they show they are reliable, you are adding another plank of wood, another steel cable to the bridge. It's a slow, careful process. You have to check the work. Sometimes a storm comes, a disagreement or a conflict, and you have to see if the bridge holds. And over a long period, after many shared experiences and consistent actions, you look one day and you have this strong, solid bridge between you. You can walk across it without fear. You can carry weight across it. You know it's safe. That feeling of safety, of being able to cross the canyon without a second thought, that, for me, is trust. This analogy is so rich. It explains why trust takes time, why consistency is important, and what the end result feels like: safety and reliability. To make this completely unforgettable, you need to anchor it with a personal story. Think of a time you had to build that bridge with someone. Let's create a story. I remember when I started my new job, there was a colleague named Mark who I had to work with on a very important project. Mark was very quiet and reserved, and I'm more of an open, talkative person. In the beginning, the canyon between us felt huge. I wasn't sure if I could rely on him. The first rope was simple. He said he would email me some important data by 3 p.m., and at 2:59 p.m. the email arrived. It was a small thing, a tiny plank in the bridge, but I noticed it. A week later, I was struggling with a part of the project, and I was too proud to ask for help. Mark must have noticed. He didn't say anything in front of the team, but he quietly sent me a message with a link to a resource that was exactly what I needed. That was a big, strong plank. He showed me he was observant and supportive without needing any recognition. The real test, the storm, came when there was a major error in our presentation, and it was actually my fault. My stomach just dropped. But when our boss asked what happened, before I could even speak, Mark said, "That was a team oversight." We missed it, and we are already working on the fix. He could have easily let me take the blame, but he didn't. He stood on that bridge with me. In that moment, the bridge became solid steel. I knew, without a doubt, that I could trust him. It wasn't one grand gesture. It was that slow, steady process of building something strong, promise by promise, action by action. By combining the glass metaphor, the bridge analogy, and this detailed emotional story, you have given a masterful answer. You've explained what trust is, how it's built, how it can be broken, and what it feels like in a real-world situation. It's in these authentic moments that your fluency truly shines. Now, let's move from an idea that is about our relationship with others to one that is profoundly about our relationship with ourselves and with time. Let's talk about patience. This is a virtue that feels more and more rare in our fast-paced world. If you were in a conversation about the stresses of modern life, and someone asked you, "How do you even practice patience anymore?" How could you answer in a way that is both wise and relatable? First, let's reach for a simile. You might say, "For me, trying to be patient feels like sitting by a river and waiting for a specific fish to bite." This is a great image. It implies waiting, yes, but also observation, quiet, and the understanding that you are not in complete control. You can have the right bait and the right fishing rod, but you can't force the fish to appear. It will come in its own time. This immediately sets a tone of calm acceptance. To explore this idea more deeply, let's build an analogy around a slow, natural process. Let's use the analogy of cultivating a bonsai tree. A bonsai tree is a perfect symbol of patience, as it requires years, even decades, of careful, gentle work. You could explain it this way. I think of patience as the art of growing a bonsai tree. You don't get a beautiful, ancient-looking tree overnight. You start with a young, ordinary sapling. Your goal is to shape it, but you can't just bend it to your will. If you force a branch too much, it will snap. Instead, you have to apply gentle, consistent pressure over a very long time. You wrap a wire around a branch and just leave it for months. You are trusting the process. You also have to prune the tree, which can feel counterintuitive. You are cutting away parts of it. This is like letting go of your own expectations and your desire for a quick result. You're cutting away the need to see progress every single day. The most important part is the daily care. You have to water it just enough, not too much, not too little. You have to make sure it gets the right amount of sunlight. It's a daily practice of attention and care without the demand for immediate reward. You might not see any noticeable change for a whole year, but you keep doing it. Patience isn't just waiting. It's actively nurturing something while accepting its natural timeline. The reward isn't just the beautiful tree you have at the end. The reward is the calm, observant, and gentle person you had to become in order to grow it. This analogy is so detailed and beautiful. It reframes patience from a frustrating act of waiting into a mindful, creative, and rewarding practice. Now, to truly bring it home, we need a personal story. Let's create one about a character, Ben, learning to bake sourdough bread. A notoriously difficult and lengthy process. Ben could tell this story. I always wanted to be a more patient person. I'm naturally very impulsive. A friend suggested I try baking sourdough bread. I thought, how hard can it be? Well, I quickly learned it was a masterclass in patience. First, you have to create a starter, which is just flour and water. But you have to feed it every single day, for weeks, like a pet. You're waiting for it to become alive, to bubble. There were days when nothing happened, and I was sure I had failed. That was my first lesson, nurturing something I couldn't see. Then came the actual baking. The process takes 2 days. You mix, you wait, you fold, you wait for hours, you shape it, you wait overnight. My first loaf was a disaster. It was flat and hard like a rock. I was so angry. I had followed the rules. My impatience wanted to quit. But I tried again, and again. I started to notice the tiny details, the temperature of the water, the humidity in the room. I had to stop trying to force it and start listening to the dough. It was its own living thing with its own timeline. After about the 5th try, I finally baked a loaf that was perfect. It had this beautiful crisp crust and an open, airy inside. And when I took it out of the oven, I felt this incredible sense of calm. The bread was wonderful, yes, but the real achievement was the person I had to be for those 2 days. I had to be slow, observant, and gentle. I couldn't rush it. Baking that bread didn't just teach me a recipe. It taught me the rhythm of patience. It's a feeling I now try to bring to other parts of my life when I feel that impulse to rush. By telling this detailed story, Ben hasn't just defined patience. He has shown the emotional journey of learning it. He has made an abstract virtue into a tangible sensory experience. The feel of the dough. The disappointment of a failed loaf. The triumph of the final product. Now that we've explored the internal challenge of patience, let's look at an idea that society often defines for us. Let's deepen our practice with another fascinating and complex abstract idea: success. We touched on it earlier with Liam's story, but it's such a rich topic, it deserves more exploration. The definition of success is deeply personal and changes so much from culture to culture, and even from person to person. This makes it a perfect topic for a deep and meaningful conversation. Imagine you're having coffee with a friend, and they say, "I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be successful. What's your take on it? Let's use our tools, but this time, let's start with an analogy." Remember, an analogy is an extended comparison that helps explain a complex system. We could compare the pursuit of success to climbing a mountain. This is a classic analogy, but we can make it our own. You could start by saying, "That's a great question. I've started to think that success is a lot like climbing a mountain. But I think many people have the wrong idea about which mountain to climb." This is an intriguing opening. It makes your friend want to hear more. You can then elaborate on the analogy. I think for a long time, society gave us all a map to the same mountain. Let's call it Mount Wealth. The path was clearly marked. Get good grades, go to a good university, get a high-paying job, get promotions. Everyone was climbing the same mountain, and success was simply about who could get to the top first. From the top of that mountain, the view was supposed to be amazing. A big house, fancy cars, respect from others. Now, you introduce a personal element to the analogy, a twist that shows your own unique perspective. But what I've realized is that climbing that mountain is incredibly crowded, and many people, even those who reach the top, find out the view isn't what they expected. They feel empty. I think true success is first figuring out which mountain is actually yours. Maybe your mountain is Mount Creativity, or Mount Family, or Mount Community. It might be a smaller mountain. The path might not be clear at all. You might have to create your own trail. It will be harder, and maybe lonelier. But the view from the top of your own mountain, that's true success. It's a sense of achievement that is deeply personal and can't be measured by anyone else. This analogy is detailed and thought-provoking. It creates a powerful visual story. To complete your answer, you could add a very brief personal anecdote to show how you came to this realization. For me, I spent a few years climbing Mount Wealth in my first job. I was doing well, but I felt like I was using someone else's muscles. It wasn't until I started volunteering at an animal shelter on weekends, which is my personal Mount Community, that I felt that true sense of purpose. That's when I knew I had to find a different path. See how layered and complete that answer is? It starts with an analogy, explains the different parts of the analogy in detail, and finishes with a personal touch that makes it authentic. It shows you've thought deeply about the topic and can articulate your viewpoint in a compelling way. Now, let's give you a chance to build a similar response. The abstract idea is knowledge. If someone asks you, "What's the value of knowledge?" How would you answer using a detailed analogy? Take a moment and think of a good comparison. What is acquiring knowledge like? You might compare it to building a toolkit or navigating an ocean. Let's use the ocean analogy. Try to develop it. What does the ocean represent? What are the boats? What are the islands? What is the weather? For instance, the ocean could be all the information that exists in the world. Vast and deep. A person with no knowledge is just drifting on a small raft, at the mercy of the currents. The boats are the tools of learning. Books, schools, experiences. As you gain knowledge, you build a bigger, better boat. You can navigate. The islands could be areas of expertise or understanding. The weather, the storms and calm seas, could be the challenges and breakthroughs in the learning process. The value of knowledge, then, is not just being on the ocean. It's the ability to build a ship strong enough to explore it, to choose your own destination, and to weather any storm you might face. Try to phrase this analogy in your own words, and then think of a tiny personal story. Maybe about learning a new skill that opened up a new world for you, and add it to the end. This is how you build a truly impressive and fluent response. So far, we have been building our skills piece by piece. We've talked about metaphors, analogies, and anecdotes. We've practiced applying them to grand concepts like happiness, freedom, and success. Now, I want to guide you through a full simulated conversation practice. We're going to create a workshop right here, right now. I'm going to present you with a new abstract concept, and I will walk you through, step by step, how to formulate a deep, natural, and fluent response, just as if we were in a conversation together. Let's imagine we are sitting in a quiet cafe. The topic of conversation turns to creativity. I turn to you and ask, I've always wondered if creativity is something you're born with, or something you can learn. What do you think creativity really is? Now, don't panic. Let's breathe and use our tools. The first step is to just let the word creativity sit in your mind for a second. What images, feelings, or ideas pop up? Don't judge them. Just notice them. Do you see a spark? A light bulb? A flowing river? A chaotic explosion of colors? Let's say the image that comes to your mind is a flowing river. That's a great starting point for a metaphor. So, your initial response could be to introduce this core metaphor. You might say, "That's a really interesting question. In my mind, creativity isn't a single object or a skill. I see it as a river that flows through everyone." This is a beautiful and gentle way to begin. You've established your central image. Now, for the second step, let's develop this metaphor into a broader analogy. A river has many parts. Let's use them to explain the different facets of creativity. I'll ask you some questions to guide your thinking. If creativity is a river, what is the source of that river? Where does the water come from? You could say the source is our experiences, our memories, our emotions, everything we take in from the world. This is the water that feeds our creative river. Okay, what about the riverbanks? What do they represent? The riverbanks could be our skills, our discipline, and our knowledge. They give the river direction. Without banks, the water would just be a swamp, a mess with no purpose. A painter needs to know how to mix colors. A writer needs to know grammar. These skills are the banks that channel the creative energy into something beautiful and coherent. Now, for a more interesting part. What about the rocks and obstacles in the river? What do they represent in the creative process? These are our challenges. They are the moments of creative block, the fear of failure, the negative feedback we receive. But what happens when water meets a rock? It doesn't just stop. It has to find a new way around. It becomes more dynamic. It creates interesting patterns and sounds. So, these obstacles, these challenges, are actually what makes the creative process interesting and leads to innovation. So, let's put all of that together into a flowing explanation. You could continue your answer like this. I see creativity as a river that flows through everyone. The source of the river is all of our life experiences, our joys, our sorrows, our observations. That's the water. But that water needs direction. That's where our skills and discipline come in. They are the riverbanks that guide the flow. A musician has to practice their scales. A chef has to master knife skills. These are the banks. And the most interesting part is the obstacles, the rocks in the river. Those are our doubts and our challenges. They force the river to change course, to become stronger, to find new pathways. So, a creative block isn't a sign that your river has dried up. It's just a big rock that you need to learn to flow around. This is a fantastic, detailed analogy. You've answered the original question, is it born or learned, by saying it's both. The water, the potential, is something we all have, but the banks, the skill, must be built and maintained. The final step, to make this truly your own, is to add a small personal anecdote. A time you experienced this river yourself. It doesn't have to be a big story about writing a novel or painting a masterpiece. It can be a simple, everyday example of creativity. You could finish your answer by saying, "I experienced this just last week, actually. I was trying to cook dinner, and I realized I was missing a key ingredient for the recipe. My first thought was to give up and order a pizza. That was a rock in my river. But then I looked at what I did have in the fridge. I started experimenting, mixing flavors I wouldn't normally put together. And I ended up creating a new dish that was absolutely delicious. In that small moment, I felt like I was navigating my own little creative river. My past experiences with flavors was the water. My basic cooking skills were the banks. And the missing ingredient was the rock that forced me to find a new path. So yes, I definitely think it's a river we can all learn to navigate. And there you have it, a complete, fluent, and deeply insightful answer to a complex, abstract question. You started with a simple metaphor, expanded it into a detailed analogy, and grounded it in a relatable, personal story. This is the pinnacle of speaking about abstract ideas naturally in English. You're not just giving an opinion. You're sharing a whole way of seeing the world. As we come towards the end of our session today, I want to take a moment to reflect on the journey we've taken. We started with the simple but profound challenge of expressing the invisible world of our thoughts and feelings. We didn't learn a long list of new, complicated words. Instead, we focused on 3 fundamental human tools of communication that you can start using right away, with the English you already possess. First, we explored the magic of metaphors and similes. We learned that by comparing an abstract feeling like sadness to a heavy, wet blanket, or an idea to a tiny seed, we build a bridge between our mind and our listener's mind. We turn a label into a shared experience, making our language more vivid, more memorable, and infinitely more powerful. This is the art of painting with words. Next, we moved on to the logical power of analogies. We saw how comparing a complex system like building a career to a more familiar one, like building a house, can bring incredible clarity to our explanations. An analogy is like a map we draw for our listener, guiding them through our thought process step by step, ensuring they don't get lost along the way. It shows a depth of understanding that goes far beyond a simple definition. And finally, we embraced the most connective tool of all, the personal anecdote. We discovered that the best way to explain an abstract value like success or courage is often not to define it, but to show it in action through a short, personal story. Stories are the heartbeat of communication. They infuse our words with emotion, authenticity, and a piece of our own unique human experience. They turn a simple conversation into a moment of genuine connection. The most important thing to remember is that this is a skill, not a special talent that some people have and others don't. It is like learning to play a musical instrument. At first, it might feel a little awkward. You might have to consciously think, "Okay, I need a metaphor here," or "What's a good story for this?" That's perfectly normal. But with practice, it will become more and more natural. The tools will become an intuitive part of how you think and speak in English. You'll start to see metaphors and analogies everywhere. You'll realize that your own life is a rich library of stories waiting to be told. So, my challenge to you is this: don't wait. Start practicing today. The next time you're in a conversation, or even just writing in a journal, and you come across an abstract idea, pause. Don't just reach for the simplest word. Try to use one of our tools. Ask yourself, what is this feeling like? What larger system does this process remind me of? What is a memory I have that illustrates this idea perfectly? The more you practice, the more fluent and confident you will become. You will not only improve your English speaking skills, but you will also become a more engaging, thoughtful, and compelling communicator. Thank you so much for joining me today at English in Fluency. It has been a pleasure to explore these ideas with you. I truly hope you found this session helpful and feel inspired to bring your abstract ideas to life. If you enjoyed this journey and want to continue improving your English with me, please consider subscribing to the channel. And I have a request for you. I would love to see you put your new skills into action. In the comments section below, please choose one abstract idea. It could be hope, or nostalgia, or justice, or any other idea that is meaningful to you. And try to describe it using a metaphor, an analogy, or a short personal story. I will read every single one of your comments, and I can't wait to see the beautiful and creative ways you express yourselves. My name is Alex, and I look forward to seeing you in our next session. Keep practicing, keep sharing, and keep letting your voice be heard.